these are two bad football teams, and there's always opportunity for some people to rise to this occasion. How do the Bears make sure, essentially, they don't lose such a winnable game?
I think it starts on the defensive side of the football, especially in the secondary, what they can do against a young quarterback. Can you mix your looks? Can you spin late from those two high shells? Bring some pressure in, meaningful game situations. 3rd and 2 to 6, I'd like to see a little bit more pressure there because I don't think Bryce Young has seen it as fast as you expected him to. Coming from Alabama, what you saw on his college tape, he hasn't used his second reaction traits as much as I expected. Again, going back to what you saw on his college tape, but he struggled, especially later in the down. And I think if you can bring pressure, disguise looks, you can set up some opportunities for your secondary to make some plays in the ball tonight.
It's interesting how, like, with Bryce Young, you do have a guy that's worked really hard to get to where he is, and he did some cool stuff when he was at Alabama. When you're watching him, are you surprised that he's having as hard of a time processing things, or is it really a byproduct of how bad the team assembled around him is?
That's a great question, Lawrence. I think it's both. That is, the first thing that stands out when you watch the Panthers on offense is their lack of team speed. They do not have speed in the perimeter. They simply don't. Adam Thielen is an older player in this league. He's their number one target. And now he's playing more in the slot where he belongs at this stage of his career. And look, he can still uncover, make plays for you underneath and at the second level. But they don't have that dynamic vertical stretch target. They don't have someone that can create consistently after the catch. And then in the interior of the offensive line, I think they're poor. And I think that's really hurt Bryce Young because he doesn't have those areas of the field now to step up, reset his throwing window, climb the pocket. As you see a lot in his tape, Lawrence, is he's retreating versus pressure, right? And you don't want to do that. You don't, not in this league. You can get away with some of that stuff, obviously, at the high school level and at the college level, but you really want your quarterback to manage that pocket and step up. There's not been a lot of room to step up for him this season, and he has had to escape much too quickly. And I think that's really limited the timing of that pass game in Carolina, in addition to not having explosive playability. And guys, we've talked about that all season. The best teams in the NFL, the best offenses have that explosive playability. And right now, Carolina simply does not have enough of it, and that has contributed to the lack of success for a young quarterback. Now, like you asked, Lawrence, I do think he can see it faster. And I think there's times in the tape where he does. It's just been very inconsistent. And I think a lot of that is also, the lack of talent around him, the lack of game-changing talent.
It looks like the fired Coach Bowl to me, frankly, and I'm just waiting to see if the Bears and Luke Getty can not get too cute offensively. This team is so vulnerable against the run, and the Bears, as the offensive line is currently constructed, have just a couple of rhinoceroses on the right side of that line that you can get behind Tevin Jenkins, and you can get behind Darnell Wright, and just that's a swinging gate right now for somebody coming around. So couldn't they just obliterate that matchup all night? This doesn't have to be pretty.
No, it doesn't. And Dan, it's a great point, especially in a short week, right? Stick to what works. Go with your core concepts tonight. Be aggressive running the football in early down situations. Stick to what can be productive tonight based on the matchup, based on what you see on the tape from Carolina. I agree with you. You can run the ball on that Panthers defense. And that will obviously help a young quarterback as well, because that will filter into your play action passing game, filter into your boot and play action concepts as well, where you can keep the young quarterback on schedule. Because if you saw last week with Bajent, his interceptions, what did you see? Late with the football, right? Wasn't throwing on time, wasn't throwing on rhythm, was coming back to secondary and third reads, but also late getting the ball out. And when you have a quarterback that does not have the high-end arm talent,
right?
You're late with the football.
Late and slow.
It's going to be an issue. It's going to be an issue. Now, look, the last interception, I think it was Tyler Scott, the rookie wide receiver. That was not a good route. That's something that you have to address in film, that you're playing against a secondary like we talked about last week in New Orleans. Aggressive cover corners, you have to give more there. You have to find a way to create separation. That's a young quarterback later in the game trying to fit the ball in. But again, it was late and the ball was behind. So really, you got to keep him on time tonight. The run game will help that now. Also create more opportunities in your pass game structure based on his traits as a thrower.
What do you think are the Bears' best run plays?
I think the best run plays. Look, everyone in the NFL runs zone. They run power. Some people call it gap, zone or gap runs. I think they're the best running outside zone. I just think that with what they have, like Dan mentioned, the right side of the offensive line, you have two guys that can reach block and they can wash defenders outside. They can drive defenders off the ball vertically, and I think that gives your running back, multiple options to bounce the ball outside, to press it vertically, to cut back. But on top of that, with your gap runs, especially if Foreman, I don't know if the news is out yet on Herbert, but if Foreman is your lead back tonight, you give him a roadmap. You give him a roadmap. This is where we're going. We're going downhill. You're going to follow the pullers. We're going to kick out. We're going to wrap. We're going to create daylight for you to press the ball vertically up the field, and that you take that roadmap and you go.
I hope that's what they do, because considering the way that the Panthers play run defense, there's an opportunity out there for them to really do a number on it. But to go back to Bagent for a second, if they run the ball effectively, that should make his life easier. You kind of spelled out what a couple of the problems were on the interceptions. Where do you think he's at his best?
I think he's at his best. Really the mid-level concepts. If you're going to throw vertically with him, they have to be max protection scheme throws. There's nothing wrong with that. That has to be a part of your offense. I would like, from a play calling perspective, at least 2 per half, where you clear and replace, you create an open void in the outside 1/3 to throw a deep over, to throw a deep cross. So those are all part of your play. But I think he's at his best in mid-level throws, where the ball is out quickly. And it doesn't mean you're running high school concepts where it's 1 to 2 ball out. That's part of it. We've seen on tape he can get backside to number 3. But in a situation where he's throwing deeper end breakers to DJ Moore, where he's throwing skinny post routes, where he's throwing the seam balls, then you can work your underneath concepts. Then you can add in the screen concepts, both at the running back position and to the wide receivers. And I would like Lawrence to see a little bit more RPOs. One, because he can run. And look, this is more situationally with him, different than Justin Fields. But you're 3rd and 2 to 6. I like to see him keep the ball in his hands at times and design concepts that give him run to throw option, because that's a part of what he can do.
Carolina's missing their top pass rusher, but how do they like to try to make passers' lives difficult?
I think tonight, especially against a young quarterback, when you're in the situation Carolina is, where their season is really now about the offseason and free agency and building that roster, I think you have nothing to lose. That's the thought process I would take as a defensive play caller, especially against a young quarterback. A lot of disguise, a lot of simulated pressure. I'd try to disguise where that 4th rusher is coming from and make him work post snap. But you have to create pressure on him and see if you can get him in a situation where he starts to turn the football over again. That's really the chance that you have to take tonight if you're Carolina. You have to find a way to create turnovers and take the football away, because right now your offense is simply not explosive enough and doesn't create enough scoring production for you. You have to find ways to get the ball back. And based on what the young quarterback did for the Bears last week, I would light him up. I would. I'm not going to lie. What do you have to lose if you're Carolina? If you get beat under pressure, that's okay. You go to the next series. But you have to be aggressive in your play calling tonight to go after the quarterback.
He canned a lot of plays last week. I noticed that. And I like the fact that can is replacing kill, because it just sounds a little nicer. And that's been the new fashion in the NFL. Is that a victory for the defense? Is that a win if all of a sudden the opposing quarterback is seeing something and he has decided that whatever he saw is what you're going to do, enough that he changes a play? Or do you look at that opportunistically and say, all right, I see this, but I'm going to this because I think we got you in something?
I think it can be a win if you force them to check at the line of scrimmage, but then you have to have another counter as well. You can't be too simplistic on defense where if they check, you check to cover 2, right? Or if they go empty, you're automatically in cover 2 every time. If you can force the quarterback to check out and to get into a different play, can you check as well? If they see zone, they check to something that's a man coverage beater. Can you counter that? Maybe it's a pressure. Maybe it's a zone pressure. Maybe you're switching where you're going to man up the backside corner in a 3-by-1 set to give him a different look post snap. But I think always defensively and with that chess match pre-snap has to be calculated into a situation where post snap it still looks different to the quarterback. And that's always the challenge, is how to win post-snap based on your pre-snap look and what you're going to present after the ball is snapped.
After a week of watching Montez Sweat with this
Mhm.
group of defenders alongside of him, what's the best way, in your opinion, that he's deployed and has the best opportunity to be a game changer?
I think the best opportunity he has is obviously as a rush in, but also, we don't talk about the run game enough with defensive ends. It's always about, getting sack production, creating pressure. And I understand that, as we've discussed all season long, this is a passing league now. But what he can do as a backside edge defender versus the run game, because he is explosive off the football, because if you're running zone away, that he can make plays, uh, really cutting down that lane for the running back to bounce the ball to the backside. There's ways when you have an explosive defensive end and you get run away, they can still be an impact player. You see it all the time with the top tier defensive ends. If you watch Myles Garrett, if you watch Nick Bosa, what they do as backside edge defenders, that's something I'm interested to watch tonight with Sweat. Because look, what you saw on the tape last week, it's his first game. He got there on a Tuesday or Wednesday afternoon, and they gave him a jersey and put him in the game. He still had some pressures. You saw that in the tape, his ability to turn the edge, to use his hands on contact, to rip through the outside edge of an offensive tackle and at least create pressure on the quarterback versus Derek Carr. But I want to see him as a pursuit player too. There's a game that stood out to me on that tape last week. It was a Taysom Hill run. I think it was for like plus 17. But Sweat made the tackle. And it was run away. He was a backside edge defender. And you saw the pursuit speed. You saw the effort. And again, that's a play that will never show up in the highlights. Absolutely not when you give up 17 yards rushing on a single play. But I like that to see him in terms of his play speed and an effort, because I think if you're a teammate of his and he's a new teammate, and you're watching tape on what he just did in his first game with Chicago Bears, I would be encouraged by that. That would create some energy for me as a defensive line teammate of his during film.
Gervon Dexter hasn't gotten a lot of snaps, and I'd love to know from you watching the tape, is there a good reason why? Like, is he an untrustworthy player, and is that why we're not seeing him?
No, I don't think so. I think that is part of going through the process of the ups and downs of your first year in the NFL. I would like to see him get more snaps, Lawrence. I would.
Me too.
Especially where the Bears are at right now. Okay, and you have to understand what you're playing for at this point. You have to be realistic. And if you're a part of that front office in Chicago, there might be a conversation, whether it's this week or the next week, when it comes down to the head coach's office and say, hey, look, we got to get these young guys in the field. We have to see what they are. We got to start creating development in our younger players. It's not happening in practice. We got to get them some reps in the field, because we got to see. We have to start preparing for the offseason and what we want to be in terms of creating those building blocks on our defensive line. So I would like to see him get more reps. But look, the Bears' run defense is excellent. I think I looked at the number today. I think they're giving up only 3.3 yards per carry. I think that's right, which is the best in the National Football League. So their run defense has been very good. But you want to get those younger players in there, because you drafted them based on the traits they have to be disruptive players in the interior defensive front. So let's get them more reps. And again, you have to tell the head coach, look, it's not going to be pretty all the time. I'm not saying that. But you got to find a way to get them in there so we can evaluate them and you can start developing more, because then you can watch tape of live reps on Sundays.